Okay, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Jim here. Jim, you really changed the consumer convenience store industry like completely. You've helped in the media and entertainment industry with Blockbuster and saved 19,000 jobs. You're in the convenience store Hall of Fame. You've led the healthy food, fresh food movement in the U.S. So it's great to have you here, and I'm excited to get into your story.
Thanks, Ben. Look forward to chatting.
Awesome. So, did you always aspire to be, a business leader? Like, how did this kind of get started in the beginning?
No, I'm afraid I wanted to be an astronaut. I didn't grow up saying I want to sell Slurpees and be CEO of 7-Eleven. No, literally as a kid, I grew up in the era of the Apollo missions and the moonwalk, and became a space geek as a kid, trying to build my own rocket, and literally grew up in the in the town next to where Robert Goddard did his original testing, early testing of rockets. And so it was deep in my DNA that I wanted to do that. Didn't quite make that journey aspirationally. Ended up being a pilot instead. That was my fallback. I never did go to space yet, but I did become a pilot.
Nice. So, how did the operational part of like your career start, where you became CEO of 7-Eleven? Like, it seemed like you got involved kind of in the gas station area, and then kind of worked your way through that. Like, how did that get started? I mean, yeah, what were the first steps?
Well, the journey really started with the power of education, and we'll talk a bit about the book that I have coming out called "Education is Freedom." But it literally was my personal journey, setting out, very small town, central Massachusetts. As I said, a town called Grafton, close to where Robert Goddard got his start. And I discovered at an early age that the more I learned, the more doors kept opening. So I had no idea what I wanted to do, as most kids don't, other than thinking, boy, it would be great to go to space and be an astronaut. Um, but that then encouraged me to study and to pursue as much education as I could get, thinking that that was my path. Um, Ended up instead going down a path toward business, and it surprised me as well as it I think surprised my family, because originally, after deciding that perhaps space wasn't in my immediate future, I thought, well, maybe I could be a lawyer, and set out to go to law school. And that then led to, well, maybe I should get a JD MBA and pursue business and law. And then that ended up leading to a career in business. And some days I still wish I had gotten that law degree, but I think it turned out okay.
So, so you kind of were you talked about education being so important. So this educational system, you went through schooling, et cetera, but like what about education, kind of learning and working your way up through the systems? Like how impactful was that? Like kind of taking advantage of different opportunities you had to learn and to really grow to become in a role of leadership. How did you kind of do that?
I'm a big believer in the American dream still existing. That's one of the very unique things about the United States. It's the opportunity, depend regardless where you come from, who you are, what you have. The tools are there, and they're not
Hmm.
always apparent, and sometimes there are big hills to climb, but it's possible for literally anyone, especially armed with the power of knowledge, to do anything they want to be. And I know the challenge I have now is it's really easy for me to say this from this position, from where I sit today, and everybody says, "Oh yeah, sure, sure, easy." Um, but the tools that we have today are so much greater than the tools that ever existed for
Hmm.
anyone to learn. That the opportunity is virtually unlimited.
Hmm. Yeah. And So, there's a lot that you can kind of, there's a lot of different areas of education, and how do you kind of focus on, how do you really focus on the right areas for you? How do you determine what areas you need to really specifically learn to be able to get to the next phase?
But it depends on who you are and what you want and where you're heading. In my case, I found that a liberal arts education gave me the greatest breadth because let's face it, in high school, none of us know what we want to do. In college, many of us don't know what we want to do. And the nice thing about a liberal arts education, I went to a small Jesuit school in Massachusetts called Holy Cross College. The greatest part of that education is the breadth of learning.
Mm,
So it's the humanities, it's the arts, it's sciences, it's mathematics, and it gives you such a solid foundation that it allows you then to branch off into virtually anything. So I think one of the challenges we face today is many of us want to specialize so early that you
mm,
find kids in high school already deciding they want to be an accountant, and going down that path. My gosh, I had no idea what I wanted to be or what I was good at in high school. And one last thing, that probably one of the most important things that I encourage everyone to do as they're embarking on this journey is that find that thing, whatever it is, or those things that really make you happy, that you enjoy
mm.
doing. Because I am blessed with being able to say I never worked a day in my life, um, because everything I did, well, okay, I take it back. I had some jobs that, but for the most part, I found that I so enjoyed the things that I was working on and doing that it never felt like work.
How did you use education and your kind of insights you gained operationally, let's just say, for example, at 7-Eleven, to introduce the right type of products? There's a ton of products you can introduce. You seem to really nail aluminum beer bottles, prepaid phone cards, etc. Like, how do you determine these are the right ones based on learning and education?
Well, a lot of it. Well, I'll give you the formula that I use in the book, and it's a pretty straightforward formula. I have things like, um, you know, first of all, what to learn. You have to learn change. You have to learn that
Mhm,
change happens, and especially at retail. If you're talking about new products, change is the lifeblood of retail because people always want something new, something different, right? And times change, weather changes, and so to be able to keep up with change is really important. And then you have to have confidence because a lot of people don't think that
mm,
they're able to, respond to change, or that they're smart enough or good enough or creative enough, whatever. So confidence is important, and then clarity is critical because you have to be able to communicate what your plan is and how you want to change. So those are the what you learn elements. Then there's the how you learn. And the how you learn is critical thinking, something often lacking. Think about as all the way back to grade school, the scientific method. You know, try something, you have a hypothesis, you try it out, you take an action, you step back, you measure the results, and you try it again. That's what science is all about, right? Well, that same method applies to virtually everything. So if you're trying to find a new product, put it on the shelf, try it out, measure the results. If the customer didn't respond, try a new version of it, try a new package, try a new flavor. And it's that repetitive scientific method that actually works. That's the critical thinking element of it. But then there's the whole issue of curiosity.
mm,
At 7-Eleven, I encourage the entire company to be curious. And you mentioned the beer bottle. We can talk about that before, but that was just curiosity. That was literally opening a refrigerator and pulling a package out and saying, wow, that's cold. That would make a great package for beer. I wonder how we could make that happen.
huh,
And then creativity, being able to have a creative solution, for it. So those are the elements that I encouraged the entire team at 7-Eleven, at Blockbuster to employ virtually every day. And they're the same elements that really are the foundational elements for learning anything. You have
mm,
to have understanding of change. You have to have uh, confidence to be able to delve into it, and clarity in listening and understanding, both give and take clarity. You have to have You have to have critical thinking to be able to understand the steps along the way, and curiosity and native curiosity. And finally, you have to have that creativity to be able to come up with these solutions. So it's a pretty simple formula.
Mhm. Yeah. So how important is the Slurpee business overall to 7-Eleven? I mean, it definitely drives people awareness for the, for the business, but in terms of bottom line and, what did you learn insights wise, around the Slurpee business for 7-Eleven?
It's a great product. It's a classic 70% margin product. I mean, think about it. It's ice and syrup and coming together and making a drink. So it was very profitable product for 7-Eleven. But more importantly, it's for 7-Eleven, it represented a unique point of differentiation. It was like the Big Mac might be for McDonald's, or the um, you know all kinds of examples that might be out there to help companies differentiate, and that's what Slurpee represents for 7-Eleven.
So you decided to take the company public, right, in 2001. Why was that the right time to do it, and what were like the impacts of taking the company public, like right after?
Well, we had a quite a long journey. We were a public company in the 1980s, and New York Stock Exchange, high flying company, was doing great, growing like crazy. And then the company ran into some issues. They had a buyout, management buyout of the company, in all the way back in 1987. And then they struggled for a while. Because they took on a lot of debt during that
Mm,
transaction, and frankly, they kind of lost track of the convenience customer. They started, selling beer, soft drinks, and cigarettes, but they really weren't offering all the other things that customers wanted conveniently. So the company slid quite a bit, and we ended up in a bankruptcy situation in 1991. Had to emerge from bankruptcy, and then once we were able to rebuild the company, put it right back on a solid path to go forward, then it was time to look at taking the company public again. So had the privilege of first taking it to Nasdaq, and
mm.
then we made a move. I think it was around probably the late 1990s. We made the move back to the New York Stock Exchange, which was a pretty big move.
So there's a lot of companies that want to expand abroad, right? Every
Yeah.
company wants to be in China. It's a huge market. We've seen companies like Uber, for example, they've struggled a lot, put a lot of cash into something like that, and it maybe wasn't the outcome that they wanted. How did you embrace the principles that you mentioned earlier, Jim, of change and being confident enough to take a stab at it to actually go and have some success in China with 7-Eleven?
Well, China's a great example. I wish I could say it was our genius in presenting a compelling plan to the Chinese government. It was quite the opposite. We were so successful in other countries. Japan, as an example, Japan really set the tone for 7-Eleven worldwide. They had a wildly successful, basically, they reinvented the business at 7-Eleven Japan. And today continue to have the best 7-Eleven stores in the world
Wow.
are in Japan. But the Chinese government, anticipating the Beijing Olympics, decided that they wanted to have recognizable international brands present in Beijing for time of the first Olympics. So they literally sent a delegation to Dallas to meet with me, and
Wow.
said, we'd like to have 7-Eleven come to China. We were already in China, but we were in Hong Kong, and then just across the way, not far from Hong Kong, in the Guangdong province, Shenzhen, etc., but really hadn't yet developed the Chinese license operation. So here the Chinese government came in. They said, we'd like to have 500 stores by the time of the in Beijing by the time of the Olympics. And I said, well, that's
Oh my.
impossible. Yeah, you can't do that. It would take us 10 years to build 500 stores here in the United States, even. Um, and they said, no, trust us, we can do this. And literally, they helped to pave the way. teamed us up with a local licensee there in China. And with the help of other international licensees like 7-Eleven Japan, we were able to very aggressively move forward. And they got to, I'm not sure they got to 500, but pretty close to it.
Really?
Dramatic growth in stores that they had when they first launched in China. Now they're doing quite well.
How different is it when you're bringing like 7-Eleven to another country? Like, do you have to change your product offering substantially? Is it a small change? Like, how do you target that? How do you determine that we can target this customer this way?
Yeah, well, the unique thing about convenience is that even in the United States, it is different on literally one corner from another corner. You
Right.
might have one corner that's next to a factory and the other corner is next to a school. Those product needs, those convenience needs are going to be dramatically different, right? And now you take that to an international market, and internationally, what might be popular in one country is not in another. I actually have a fun story. We were encouraging our Japanese licensee to sell coffee because here in the United States, we were coffee was a huge portion of our convenience business, and in Japan, customers were used to drinking coffee two ways. They had basically little porcelain cups that mostly they drank very much like the Europeans, or if they wanted it to go, they'd drink it in little cans that were heated and little
Huh.
in little coolers or heaters. And we said, "Oh my gosh, this is a perfect time to offer coffee, in cups like Starbucks like coffee." And our Japanese licensee said, "No, you don't understand the Japanese customer. They're never going to drink coffee like that." And one day we were touring a store in Japan, kept encouraging them, you ought to try it. Put in a coffee bar like we have in the United States. And here we were trying to go into a store on a store tour, and there was a big line in front of our store. Well, but unfortunately, it wasn't for our store. A Starbucks had opened up next door. And people were crazy about Starbucks coffee. And so, it's just one of those things that it's a classic example of retail and customers that will change. And what they want tomorrow is going to be very different from what they wanted yesterday and very different from what they want next week or next month. And so being able to stay up with that change, anticipate it, respond very, very quickly is really at the heart of retail. And it's what's one of the things 7-Eleven has done really quite well over the years.
Mhm. And you also like being embracing change and trying to always kind of anticipate what the customer wants. You seem to really do well with that with fresh daily products. Like you built up this whole network to be able to do that every day to have brand new products. How impactful was that with customers? Was that something that they just gravitated towards 7-Elevens more because of that? Like how much did that change the landscape for you guys?
Yeah, it was huge. And, I'll give you the history of that. I literally started, my first job was at McDonald's, flipping burgers and selling French fries. And so I learned a lot about the food service industry through McDonald's, through my time at McDonald's during high school and college. And then I got to 7-Eleven, and I mean, we couldn't sell a decent hot dog back in the day. We were, it was not exactly a great fresh food option. Then we went through these challenges organizationally, financially, et cetera, at 7-Eleven. And we ended up partnering with 7-Eleven Japan to help bring the company out of its financial troubles. And I got to go to Japan for the first time ever. I remember it was back in 1990, 1991. And I was shocked that they had so totally reinvented the business that they were able to sell restaurant quality sushi, if you can imagine. Here we were
Oh.
struggling selling a decent hot dog, and they're selling restaurant quality sushi in a convenience store. And it was just shocking. What they had done is using technology, completely reinvented the supply chain. So while we were getting deliveries of 7-Eleven in the United States maybe once or twice a week, they were getting it 3 times a day into every 7-Eleven store. And so what they're able to do is build this whole network of beautiful, high quality commissary operations. So you could make sushi in this facility, and it would supply 3 times a day to local 7-Eleven stores. So the quality was fabulous, and it really showed me the power of technology and the opportunity in fresh foods. So I brought that network, that infrastructure back to the United States, and they're not quite there yet. I think there's a little ways to go before you're ready to eat, sushi full time at 7-Eleven in the U.S. But if you ever get a chance to travel to Asia, please check out Taiwan, Thailand, Hong Kong, Korea, Japan. The food service in those stores are fabulous, and they'll get there here in the United States eventually.
Yeah, that's fascinating how you recognize that we could kind of apply one of the other branches to the global operations. Like an interesting learning, like kind of way you looked at the learning, like a learning experience there, for sure.
Yeah, best practices are, it's something that a lot of businesses talk about and not enough businesses do, which is, and it's always hard for a licensee. We were the owners. 7-Eleven was invented in the United States right here in Dallas, Texas, it started. And so the idea that we could actually have one of our licensees in a different country have a better 7-Eleven solution than we had here in the United States was really hard for many people to accept. Um, but coming back to education, it's all about learning. And too often, whether it's business or your personal life, too often people get locked in on an idea that this is right and that's wrong, and they literally shut down. They stop learning. They stop growing. Businesses do the same thing. So the opportunity is there for everyone to keep learning, keep growing, keep that curiosity, that creativity alive.
Yeah, I totally agree. So the way with Blockbuster, the way that you kind of looked at the business, it was at a very unique time, especially because it was around the 2008 crash or so. It was hard to get money. How did you go about first? I mean, even trying to lead the streaming operations, and then also like how did you go about saving all these jobs in the end and getting an acquisition at one of the toughest times, arguably, for the company?
Yeah, it was quite an adventure. Um, the vision. First of all, everything you read about Blockbuster, 90% of it is false. It's just people always go to the easy answer. Oh, Netflix crushed Blockbuster. That's
Yeah.
the Blockbuster didn't keep up with technology. None of it true. What really happened was the opportunity was clear. It was very obvious that streaming was coming. The question that no one, or the answer that no one had at the time was, how long will it take for bandwidth to be there, for devices to be there, for you to be able to have a smart television? No one knew.
Huh.
And so all we could do is set the stage, take us down that path toward a streaming future. And the company already had a history of this, by the way. The company started with VHS tapes, and
Huh.
along comes the DVD, right? Now, that wasn't that big a technology change, but it was pretty big. I mean, you've got an entire 5,000 store network full of VHS tapes, and you've got to switch now to DVDs and hope that customers will buy a DVD player. And I mean, it was a big, big transformation, but the company made that transformation. So we looked at the future of streaming and said, yeah, it can happen. We're going to be there. The very first thing I did when I joined the company was to buy a streaming company because
Right.
no one had the technology at the time. We weren't going to go invent the technology. But the studios had decided that they too saw this coming. And they came together and created a company called MovieLink that
Mm.
was their effort to do streaming by themselves so that there'd be one stop for everybody. You wouldn't have to go to Hulu or Amazon or Apple or any of these or Netflix. It'd be one stop. So that's why we bought MovieLink in collaboration with the studios to have a one-stop shop, just like the Blockbuster store. That I know if I go there, I can get old movies, new releases, foreign films, TV, all in one place. That was the vision. Now, then
Mm,
along comes 2008 financial crisis. Everybody forgets that 2008, 2009 happened. So here we were bumping along, doing great, doubled earnings.
mm,
2008 press release, Blockbuster crushes it, great earnings. Oh, but however, they have $1 billion of debt and they may not be able to refinance it because the banks have basically shut down. Lehman Brothers collapsed and the banks were doing no lending. That then led to the dominoes starting to fall. You know,
mm,
uh, people getting a lot of negative press about Blockbuster and are they going to make it, et cetera, et cetera. Meanwhile, Netflix had no debt. Netflix people were throwing money at to be able to help it, make that transformation to digital. And unfortunately, we had to go through a restructuring. We did get the company sold to a great partner, Dish Networks, but even for Dish, it was too early. And it's
mm,
hard looking back because you go, wow, why couldn't they do it? Well, but it was only 2011, and we were still at 3G and
mm,
very, very limited streaming capability. So their plan was to wait for 5G and mobility and do it right, make it
mm.
much more convenient. Um, Meanwhile, they closed all the stores, but we were able to preserve the company, get it sold, made it through those tough times, but it wasn't easy.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that, I mean, it seemed like both companies didn't really have streaming figured out yet at the time. So there's a lot of opportunity anyways, even to just increase the core business, make as much revenue from that, and then funnel that into streaming. Like it was just because, I mean, if you're making money at the time too, anyways, why was it just so difficult to kind of build it in, even just internally? Like why was there kind of this external need for financing? Just the debt load was too much at the time?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Ben, because you're right. Blockbuster was a cash machine. But
Yeah.
here was the single biggest challenge. And this is basically what the crushing blow was. We had 90-day credit terms. So, in other words, you buy a movie
Uh,
today, you rent it for 3 months, and then you pay the studios for the movie, right? So, we would always make more money on virtually every movie we would buy before we had to pay for it. Now, when there were rumors that Blockbuster was going to file bankruptcy, then the studios, our vendors, if you will, then they got
oh,
nervous. So they said, well, we don't want to be stuck with bad debt. We don't want Blockbuster to owe us and not be able to pay us. So therefore, Blockbuster, you're going to go on cash terms.
oh
That
wow.
that one change is really what caused the need for Blockbuster to restructure the business and file for bankruptcy because that one change took $400 million in cash out of the business almost
Uh,
overnight within like a
and
2 period.
did you try like changing the narrative in the press? Like, how did this even get out in the press? I mean, it's a conversation between you and the bank. Like, how did this kind of even come about?
I learned a lot about the power of perception
Uh,
and the press, unfortunately, and you know, look, there's a lot of negative about the press and media and all this stuff. They're doing their job. They're looking for stories. Now, sometimes do they do as much homework as they should? Not always. And this was the case with Blockbuster. The perception was that Blockbuster was being beat up by Netflix, taking all their business away. Netflix was taking very little. We had virtually the same offering. We had
mm,
DVDs by mail. We had kiosks like Redbox. We had uh, an offer called Total Access. So it really wasn't the competition that was, challenging the Blockbuster. But with $1 billion of debt that we had because about 10 years earlier, Viacom spun the company off as a public company and put a
mm,
lot of debt on it. Now, it could because
mm,
Blockbuster could support that debt. There's plenty of cash flow. So when all of a sudden it was time to repay that debt, restructure that debt in 2009, the company would have been able to do it. But the perception of the press and then the since the press is blasting this news about Blockbuster's impending bankruptcy, caused the studios to get nervous. Once the studios got nervous, when one went to cash terms, then another went, and another went, and then
Mm.
it was like a series of dominoes. All of a sudden, we didn't have the cash to continue and had to restructure the company.
Was it difficult to be reliant upon these studios? Like, because they're the ones who have the content, you have the distribution. I mean, they probably want to get into your area, you want to kind of get into theirs. Like, how difficult was it managing that relationship?
It was pretty challenging, and I tell you the biggest challenge I had, to be honest with you, it was at 7-Eleven. I had established relationships with the CEOs at all of the major companies, and if you're having trouble getting a new beer can invented, you have lunch with August Bush the Fourth, and you say, "Hey, this is an opportunity for you and us, um, but I need help to knock down the obstacles within your organization." Um, I hadn't yet established those relationships at Blockbuster. I was the new kid in, so I was dealing more with division heads that were running, not the entire studio, but instead were running, the DVD division of Sony or
Mm,
Warner Brothers, et cetera. And that was a different level of management that couldn't make those decisions or take those risks. They were managing basically their division on a budget. And that relationship ends up being very different than a top to top CEO relationship, where a CEO can say, I'm going to take this risk because it's the right thing long term. I'll guarantee that every one of those studios, if they had it to do over again, would probably make a different decision today to have Blockbuster be able to survive longer to make that transition to digital, because it would have helped the studios, and we would, even as a consumer, have that one stop shop today versus, let's see, I want to see Top Gun, the first one. Where do I find it? Is it on Amazon?
mm.
Is it on Hulu? Is it on Netflix? That wouldn't exist in that world that we envisioned for streaming for Blockbuster and the studios.
Yeah, I mean, you are right. It doesn't exist today. There's only a select amount of movies you can see because this is what they've licensed, and that's kind of that. And even
Exactly.
independent content, it's only this is what you can see here, this is what you see here, etc. So
Exactly.
it would be unique. Just the last two questions that I have. So, do you still have a relationship with John, who was really instrumental in Blockbuster? Do you still have John Antioco?
Oh, sure. Yeah. John and I actually worked at 7-Eleven together. And
Really?
oh yeah, he was at 7-Eleven back in the day. He was running merchandising when I was leading the gasoline operations at 7-Eleven. So yeah, John and I go way back. Now, we have very different styles, very different point of view. I think John would probably say, "Yeah, Jim screwed it up. I had it all set up." I would say, "Well, John kind of had had put the company in a little difficult situation when I got there." But we've got a different view of the world. But I think it's safe to say we're still friends.
Yeah, good to hear. So the last question I have is in terms of like with Fresh and Easy, why did you decide to acquire them? I mean, Wild Oats seemed to have a strong business. You had this Walmart, I think you were developing. Why decide to get Fresh and Easy involved in all of that?
Oh, it was a beautiful plan. But here's what happened. It first I was able to acquire the Wild Oats brand. That occurred when Whole Foods bought Wild Oats
Huh.
back in 2007. And so the FTC said you can't keep the Wild Oats brand, you have to sell it. So they sold the brand. The owner of that brand called me up, called a company called Ukaipa to help finance it, and we all came together and brought the brand back to market. We envisioned it as a consumer product brand, but the long term vision, what I got excited about, was a healthy 7-Eleven. Imagine Whole Foods meets 7-Eleven. Would have been
Right.
a great consumer proposition, right? Better for you foods, still convenient, grab and go, especially with foods, with this infrastructure that I learned from Japan about three times a day delivery, et cetera. So we first acquired Wild Oats. brought it to Walmart because one thing we knew we needed is cost of goods. Convenience stores are expensive. Whole Foods are expensive. Imagine a Whole Foods convenience store. It would be crazy, crazy expensive because organic foods, right? Are a little more. So I took the brand to Walmart and said, we'll give you organic foods across the entire chain. All I really want is a good cost of goods. So let me borrow your buying power, your scale, and then I'll take it to my own stores. And we're not going to compete with you with our little, healthy convenience stores. And Walmart liked the idea. I had a relationship with the senior management from previous days at 7-Eleven. And so we set off to build a Wild Oats brand within Walmart, and it took off. It was growing like crazy. I think we had achieved over 250, $300 million in revenues in the first 6 months that we had the brand in Walmart. Um, then, since the brand was on a good trajectory, we said, now let's buy a chain of stores rather than start from scratch.
Hmm.
Fresh and Easy was built by the British retailer Tesco, and they wanted to build the future of convenience. So they put 200 stores throughout California and Arizona and Nevada, and they built this commissary copying 7-Eleven Japan for fresh foods and that capability. They had ready to eat, ready to cook, ready to heat meals like mac and cheese. They had wonderful product offering. So our vision was we're going to apply the Wild Oats brand to that food. 50% of the US population saw it as a Whole Foods like brand. We'll buy those stores, we'll get them turned around, and we'll be on our way. We'll have created this healthy convenience store, and then we'll just roll it out worldwide. Now, then again, unfortunately, a series of dominoes happened. Walmart changed their management team, and the new
Oh,
management team, Doug McMillan and his guys, came in and said, why are we going to build the Wild Oats brand? We should build our own
mm,
great value organic brand.
uh,
They gave us notice. They killed Wild Oats and they changed it to Great Value Organic. Now,
huh.
meanwhile, Fresh and Easy, the British entity, was losing boatloads of money. I think they spent $2 billion trying to bring that brand to California. And we were able to cut the burn from it was burning, believe it or not, over 200 million a year in cash. And
Jeez.
we were able to get that cut to about 50. But while we're out trying to bring in new investors and continue that transformation of Fresh and Easy, Walmart pulled the plug, and that caused us to lose our favorable cost of goods scenario for the future. And so, unfortunately, we had to unwind Wild Oats and Fresh and Easy in the process. But we thought, a great vision. It's kind of like, here's the way I characterize it. I've had three at bats. And 7-Eleven, I was able to hit the grand slam. We had a great run at 7-Eleven, got the company sold to our largest licensee in 2005, and it was a huge home run. Next two at bats, at least I had the at bats, but they were long, long fly outs. Blockbuster, I had it. They were right at the wall. It could have been a home run, but unfortunately, the financial markets took us out. And then Fresh and Easy, long fly out. Could have been, woulda, coulda, but we didn't quite get there. The next one, I'm still looking forward to that next at bat. We'll see what happens.
Well, Jim, I appreciate you coming on. I think look, you have a great story, and people should definitely check out your Education is Freedom book when it's fully out. I think your story of even just going from working at McDonald's to leading, a convenience store like chain, it's definitely impressive, and it's something that I think a lot of people can learn from and apply to their own lives. So they should definitely check it out. And thanks for sharing your story.
Thanks, Ben. I'll give you one last glimpse at the cover for Education is Freedom. Look for it at Amazon and at a bookstore probably February 2024. So look forward to this coming back. Maybe I'll come back and we'll talk about the book.
Yeah,